Welcome back to the program. We have been saying on this show for many years that these vaccines are not safe, they're not effective, and they can kill you. Now, I have been censored for that and other things, not just me. Dr. Robert Malone, Dr. Pierre Corey, Dr. Zelenko, may he rest in peace, Dr. Peter McCullough, many others have been castigated, shunned, censored, banned, even had their medical license revoked. Why? Because they refused to lie to the American people. They refused, as I, to give you something that was absolutely not true, and more importantly, by lying to you, could cause you to harm yourself. That is something that I never would do to my audience, number one. And number two, thankfully, many of these great doctors that have had their licenses revoked, have been shunned, have been shadow banned, have been attacked. Possibly Zelenko was even killed. I think the jury's still out on that as well. These folks are brave. They are patriots. And they speak from the heart. And they have gone out above and beyond, knowing full well their license could be revoked, their careers could end, they could be shunned from the medical community. But you know what? It wasn't about titles. It wasn't about money. It was about saving lives. And people did exactly that. And now, all these years later, as they refused to publish these correct reports and these medical reports out there because it didn't fit the narrative of Big Pharma and their money-making schemes, now they're coming to fruition. Bombshell vax versus unvaxxed study finally sees the light of day, and the results, well, of course, are staggering. Health journalist and film producer Del Bigtree, by the way, good guy, never had a chance to interview him, but we've been running in the same circles for years. As a matter of fact, Brandy Vaughn, may she rest in peace, was a Merck whistleblower. You guys probably remember the interview many years ago. No question in my mind did they kill her, okay? Even she said, I'm not suicidal. If anything happens to me, I didn't do anything to harm myself. And Del was very close with her. She ran that organization, Learn the Risk. There's other people that I knew from that organization. Some of them even advertised at one point on the show. So I don't know Del, but I know of him. And of course his Unvaxxed movie was incredible, let's face it. So Del Bigtree is releasing a new film called An Inconvenient Study. That's right. Which follows Bigtree's years and long exchange with Dr. Marcus Zervos, head of infectious disease at Henry Ford Health in Detroit, Michigan, a doctor who is also as pro-vaccine as they get. So let's see. What are his certifications? Let's see. He's the American Board of Internal Medicine Infectious Disease certified. He is a American Board of Internal Medicine certified. Educated at Wayne State University in Michigan in 1979. He then did his internship at Wayne State University in 83 and 80, and fellowship at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor Infectious Disease in 1987. In 2016, Dr. Zervos crossed paths with Del Bigtree, who urged him to take on something of a public health announcement, having avoided decades of studies comparing the health outcomes of vaccinated and unvaccinated children. Dr. Zervos agreed, determined to prove Del Bigtree and other vaccine skeptics wrong. However, at the time, he vowed, whatever the results will be, they will be published. Before diving into Zervos' findings, the film laid out prior evidence raising serious concerns and questions about vaccine safety. One striking example came from a Dr. Peter Abbe. Once a vaccine believer, Dr. Abbe became a skeptic after discovering that the DTP vaccine that he helped promote for African children was 2 to 3 times higher mortality among the vaccinated. Decades after launching the DTP program in New Guinea, Dr. Abiy realized only half the children that had received the shot, giving him a perfect comparative study between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated children. The DTP vaccine did protect against diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, but there was also more than a twofold increase in overall mortality. The results stunned Dr. Abiy, who now speaks openly about what he discovered. It's important to recognize that no routine vaccine was tested for overall effect on mortality in randomized trials before being introduced. I guess most of you think that we know what our vaccines are doing. Of course, we don't, he said. The film then turns to a Dr. Paul Thomas, who had his license suspended after publishing this study. Dr. Thomas studied 3,000, this was not a small study, 3,324 children, and found that unvaccinated children had fewer doctor visits and overall better health outcomes. Some of the data showed that in the vaccinated, fevers were 9 times higher, ear pain 3 times higher, ear infections 2.5 times higher, conjunctivitis 2.5 times, eye disorders 1.8% higher, asthma 5 times higher, hay fever 6 to 7% higher, sinusitis 4.3% higher, breathing issues 3% higher, anemia 5.5% higher, eczema 4.5% higher, hives 2.1% higher, dermatitis 1.4% higher, behavioral issues 4 times higher, gastroenteritis 4.7% higher, weight and eating disorders 2.5 times higher. And then he goes on, and I'll go into more, but this is what he said and what happened to him.
What I noticed in the first decade or so of my practice is kids were getting sicker and sicker. And over the next decade, as more and more patients chose not to vaccinate, I got to see the difference. But I wanted to see, could I prove it? So we got all the data from my practice. We looked at every baby born into my practice and published it in an international journal of public health. What we found, and that study was peer-reviewed, it was robust, we found massive increases. I mean, we're talking 400 to 500% more. Allergies, autoimmune conditions, neurodevelopmental issues, and then we had infections of all kinds. Massively increased in the vaccinated compared to the unvaccinated. What happened when I published that study? Within days of it being available online, I get a call from my attorney. Don't go see any patients, don't write any prescriptions, don't go into the office. Your license has been emergently suspended. You are a threat to public health.
Can you believe that? A threat to public health because he dared to tell the truth about these vaccines. Unbelievable. This then set the stage for the recurring problem behind the vax versus unvax dilemma. These studies weren't rejected for weak data. They were rejected because the data was unwelcome. Time and time again, the findings were dismissed simply because they didn't come from top-tier institutions or appear in major medical journals. You know, the major medical journals, the ones that are all paid off by Big Pharma to print their lies and their bullshit? Yeah, those, exactly. That reality led Bigtree to recruit Dr. Marcus Zervos to run such a study. Dr. Zervos was one of the leading infectious disease doctors in the country, and Henry Ford Health was a very respected medical center with one of the nation's largest patient databases. Bigtree saw Dr. Zervos as the perfect candidate to conduct a large-scale vax versus unvaxxed study that could track children over a certain period of time. He told Dr. Zervos that this was his opportunity to prove the anti-vaxxers wrong, an angle that convinced him to take on this study. Dr. Zervos agreed, and the study was completed in 2020. as Big Tree anticipated, the results were devastating for the vaccinated. But there was one major problem. Dr. Zervos chose not to publish the study. In 2022, Big Tree convinced Dr. Zervos to sit down and explain why. Knowing the importance of the moment, he recorded the conversation on hidden camera. Then Dr. Zervos openly admitted on tape why he chose not to publish the data. He said bluntly, quote, "Publishing something like that, I might as well retire. I'll be finished," end quote. You see, that's what they do. They basically have these folks from Big Pharma telling the doctors, this is what we need from you. We need you to say that this drug is a good drug, that this drug will help X, Y, and Z, and A, B, and C. And if you don't, well, then we're going to come after you because we have all the money from all the drugs that we've been pushing. I mean, they're basically a drug cartel, let's face it, right? They are drug cartels. I mean, we talk about Sinaloa, Trendeagra, we talk about, Los Zetos, all these different drug cartels. No, the real ones are, let's see, Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, GlaxoSmithKline, I don't know, Script. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other ones. Those are the real drug cartel members, okay? So then he says, I can't publish this study because if I do, I'm finished. They'll come after me. I'll lose my license. So in other words, he didn't have the balls, okay? That's the reality. But here's what that study revealed. Vaccinated children were 4 times more likely to have asthma, 3 times more likely to have atopic diseases like eczema, nearly 6 times higher risk for autoimmune deficiency disorders, a category that includes over 80 different diseases, 5.5 times higher risk for neurodevelopmental disorders, 2.9 times more motor disability disorders, 4.5 times more speech disorders, 3 times more developmental delays, 6 times more acute and chronic ear infections, and the list goes on and on and on. In nearly 2,000 unvaccinated children, there were zero cases of ADHD, 0 cases of diabetes, 0 cases of behavioral problems, 0 cases of learning disabilities, 0 cases of intellectual disabilities, 0 cases of neurological tics or other psychological disorders. The study conclusion is devastating. It literally states, in contrast to our expectations, we found that exposure to vaccination was independently associated with an overall 2.5-fold increase in the likelihood of developing a chronic health condition when compared to children unexposed to vaccinations. So the parents out there that have children, or if you have children and they have children, so your grandchildren, perhaps you want to push them not to have their childhood vaccinations, because these vaccinations do a hell of a lot more harm than they do good. And some of them are completely unnecessary. I mean, why would you give a 7 or 8 year old girl a shot to, prevent hepatitis or something like that? These are just extra shots that can really harm a child. Now they talk about the schedule, right? Have 1 shot on this day, then wait 2 weeks and have another shot, another 2 weeks. I wouldn't take any of them. I wouldn't take flu shots. I wouldn't take any of them. What you cannot cure with chicken soup could possibly kill you, okay? Keep that in your mind, because clearly we are seeing the results of not just DTP, but of COVID, long COVID, strokes, cancers, pericarditis, myocarditis, advanced cancers, all these different crazy things, brain, all these crazy, disgusting, sudden death, all these things that we talked about for the last 5 years. We now know that they were all caused by them, quote, flying the plane as they're building it. In other words, they didn't care. They only cared about this. They didn't care about the side effects. They didn't care what it could do. It was simply, let's get these drugs into the bodies of as many people as humanly possible so that we can make a fortune on them. And that's what it was. It was profits over people rather than people over profits. And that is the fundamental change in the health industry that must come from HHS and from these doctors. Because it can't be about how much money we make. It has to be about how many lives we can save. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Put them down in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one.